He thought his wife had been dead for 5 years, until her sister pulled up in a luxury Mercedes, rolled down the window, and said just 3 words that would shatter everything he believed. "Get in, now." David's hands trembled as he stared at the woman he'd barely spoken to since the funeral, the woman who'd blamed him for everything, sitting behind the wheel with tears streaming down her face and an envelope in her passenger seat with his missing wife's handwriting on it. For 5 years, David had visited that grave every Sunday, left fresh lilies, whispered apologies into the wind. And now, Rachel's sister was telling him it was all a lie. The grave he'd been visiting, the headstone he'd touched with shaking fingers, the funeral where he'd collapsed in grief, all of it built on a foundation of deception that was about to crumble. His wife, the woman he'd loved since college, the woman whose smile could light up a room, the woman he'd held as she took her last breath in that hospital bed after the car accident. She was alive. And her sister, Jennifer, knew where she was. But before we continue with this beautiful story, please kindly subscribe to this channel and comment where you are watching from. And also share below, what life or relationship challenge are you facing right now? Or what someone you know is going through? Don't forget to like this video as well. All these mean a lot to us. David stood frozen on the sidewalk outside his small apartment, grocery bags cutting into his palms. The Mercedes idled at the curb, completely out of place in this rundown neighborhood he'd moved to after losing everything. Jennifer, Rachel's younger sister, looked different. Designer sunglasses, expensive haircut, pearl earrings that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The last time David had seen her was at the cemetery, when Jennifer had screamed that it was his fault, that her sister would still be alive if he'd just been paying attention. If he'd been driving instead of Rachel that night, if he'd loved her enough to protect her. "I don't understand," David whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of traffic. Jennifer pushed the passenger door open with a trembling hand. "You will, but not here. Please, David. I know you have every reason to hate me after what I said at the funeral, but Rachel," her voice cracked, raw with emotion, "Rachel needs you." The world tilted sideways. Rachel, present tense, needs, not needed, not the past tense of grief and memory and loss. His wife's name spoken like she was breathing, living, existing somewhere in the world right now, while he stood on a cracked sidewalk with expired milk in his grocery bag. David's groceries hit the pavement. Eggs cracked, yolks spreading like gold across the concrete. Milk rolled into the gutter, the carton splitting open. A can of soup bounced and rolled into the street. He didn't notice. His legs moved on autopilot, carrying him to the car. His heart and expose itself to the world. He slid into the leather seat, and the door closed with an expensive thunk that belonged to a different life, the life he'd had before the accident, before the funeral, before 5 years of surviving instead of living. "Is she alive?" David's voice came out broken, shattered into pieces. "Jennifer, is my wife alive?" Jennifer didn't answer. She just drove, knuckles white on the steering wheel, jaw clenched so tight David could see the muscle jumping beneath her skin. They left the city behind, heading toward the coast, toward money, toward mansions and beach houses and a world David hadn't seen in half a decade. The envelope sat between them like a bomb waiting to explode, Rachel's handwriting on the front making his chest ache with a pain he thought he'd learned to live with. 20 minutes of silence. The only sound was the hum of the engine and David's ragged breathing. Then Jennifer finally spoke. "She made me promise not to tell you, made me swear on our mother's grave that I'd never reach out, never give you hope, never let you know the truth." A bitter laugh escaped her throat. "But I can't do this anymore. I can't watch what it's doing to her, to you, to everyone who loved her. I can't keep this secret when it's killing us all." "What are you talking about?" David's hands were shaking so badly he had to grip his knees to steady them. "There was a body. I identified her body, Jennifer. I stood in that morgue and looked at my wife's face and I collapsed. They had to sedate me. I buried my wife. I watched them lower her casket into the ground. That wasn't Rachel. The words hung in the air like smoke. Impossible to grasp. Impossible to breathe around. Impossible. Insane. David had stood in that sterile morgue, had forced himself to look at her face, had seen the burns and the damage from the fire but still recognized the curve of her jaw, the shape of her nose. The closed casket funeral because the damage was too severe. The insurance payout that barely covered the debts Rachel had left behind, medical bills, credit cards, a mortgage on a house they'd been about to lose anyway. "You're lying," David said, but his voice wavered with hope and terror in equal measure. Jennifer reached over and grabbed the envelope, thrust it at David with shaking hands. "Read it. She wrote it 3 months ago. I wasn't supposed to give it to you unless—" She stopped, biting her lip hard enough to draw blood. "Unless what?" "Unless she died. For real this time." David's hands trembled as he opened the envelope, his fingers clumsy with shock and disbelief. Rachel's handwriting. Those familiar loops and curves he used to watch as she wrote grocery lists, birthday cards, love notes that she'd hide in his lunch bag. The letter started with 2 words that made David's chest cave in, made the air leave his lungs in a rush. "My love." Tears blurred his vision, but he kept reading, his hands shaking so badly the paper rustled. Rachel's voice came through the ink, explaining the impossible, the threats that had started 6 months before the accident, the dangers she'd discovered at her job as a financial analyst for a major corporation, the fraud she'd uncovered, the crimes that went all the way to the executive level, the evidence she'd gathered thinking she could be a hero, thinking she could make a difference. A woman named Maria Chen had died in that crash, a woman who looked enough like Rachel that with the fire damage, with the chaos and confusion, the identification was believed. A woman who had no family, no one to question it, no one to demand a second look. "This is insane," David breathed, his voice barely audible. "This is absolutely insane. People don't just— You can't fake your own death. That's not real life. That's movies and TV shows and—" "Keep reading," Jennifer said softly, her voice thick with tears. The letter went on, and with each word David felt his world reconstructing itself into a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Rachel had been involved in something at her company, had discovered financial crimes, fraud that went all the way to the top, money laundering and embezzlement and schemes that ruined lives. When she'd tried to report it, when she'd gone to her supervisor with evidence, the threats had started. Anonymous calls at 3 in the morning, breathing on the other end of the line. Photos of David leaving work, walking to his car, completely unaware he was being watched. A message delivered to their home, a simple note that said, if Rachel didn't disappear, if she didn't stop asking questions, David would be the one who ended up dead. His body would be found in an alley, an accident, a robbery gone wrong, and Rachel would have to live with knowing she'd gotten him killed. So Rachel had run, had staged her own death with the help of people David didn't know, couldn't imagine. FBI agents and witness protection officers and people who specialized in making someone vanish, had left David to grieve, to struggle, to survive alone because she thought it was the only way to keep him safe, had watched from a distance as he sold their house, as he moved to a smaller apartment, as he worked 2 jobs to pay off her debts, as he visited her grave every Sunday with fresh flowers and a heart that wouldn't stop breaking. If you're enjoying this story so far, pause and comment, "I am enjoying this story," below. Why now? David looked up at Jennifer, his vision swimming with tears he couldn't control. Why are you telling me this now? Why after 5 years? Jennifer's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks and dripping off her chin. Because she's sick, David. Really sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She has maybe 3 months, and she's been asking for you every single day. Every morning she wakes up and the first thing she says is your name. She made me promise not to tell you while she was alive. Made me swear I'd let you move on, let you find happiness, let you build a new life. But I can't. I won't let her die without seeing you one more time. I won't let her leave this world thinking you hate her, thinking you moved on, thinking she made the right choice. The world stopped spinning. Everything stopped. 5 years of grief, anger, survival, rebuilding, all of it meaningless. All of it built on a lie. Sarah was alive. Sarah was dying. Sarah had left him to protect him, and now she was dying, and he'd lost 5 years with her. 5 years they could have had. 5 years that were gone forever. Where is she? Jennifer turned onto a private road lined with palm trees that swayed in the ocean breeze. At the end sat a massive beachfront estate, all glass and white stone and modern architecture. The kind of place David and Rachel used to look at in magazines and dream about when they were young and in love and planning their future together. Before the bills piled up, before the stress, before everything fell apart. She's been here the whole time, 2 hours from our old apartment, close enough to know you were okay, far enough that you wouldn't accidentally find her. Jennifer's voice was bitter, angry at her sister, angry at the situation, angry at the unfairness of it all. The company she was going to expose, they went down 6 months after her death. FBI investigation, 15 executives in prison, millions of dollars recovered. Rachel's testimony, given under a different name, behind screens, in secret, was the key to everything. And then she was free, free to come back, free to reclaim her life. But by then I'd moved on, David finished. But it was a lie. He'd never moved on. He'd just learned to breathe around the grief, learned to get out of bed in the morning, learned to exist in a world without her. Jennifer parked in front of the house. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, David could see someone in a wheelchair on the deck, facing the ocean, watching the waves crash against the shore. Even from this distance, even after 5 years, even though it was impossible, David knew that silhouette, knew the way Rachel held her shoulders, slightly hunched like she was protecting herself from the world, knew the tilt of her head when she was thinking deeply about something, knew her like he knew his own heartbeat. "She doesn't know I'm bringing you," Jennifer said quietly. "She'll be angry with me. She'll say I betrayed her trust. But she's running out of time to be angry, and I'm running out of time to make this right." David's hand was on the door handle, but he couldn't make himself move, couldn't make himself open the door and step out and walk toward his wife who'd been dead for 5 years but was actually alive. 5 years. 5 years of thinking Rachel was gone forever. 5 years of guilt, wondering if he'd missed signs of her unhappiness, if he could have saved her, if he'd been a better husband. 5 years of sleeping alone in their bed until he couldn't afford the mortgage and had to sell the house and move into a studio apartment where he could hear his neighbors fighting through the walls. 5 years of building a new life from ashes and broken pieces, and now everything was a lie. Did she ever love me? David's voice broke on the question he'd been too afraid to ask. Or was it all? Was our entire marriage just... "Don't," Jennifer cut him off sharply, almost angrily. "Don't do that to yourself. Don't question what you had. Whatever Rachel did, however much it hurts, it was because she loved you too much. She chose your life over having you. Every single day for 5 years, she chose your safety over her happiness. That's love, David. Twisted and painful and maybe wrong, but it's love." David got out of the car on legs that felt disconnected from his body. He walked toward the house like he was moving through water, each step harder than the last, each breath catching in his throat. The front door was unlocked. Inside, everything was expensive and cold and nothing like the cluttered, warm apartment he and Rachel had shared. The apartment full of books and plants and photos on every wall, and the couch they'd bought at a thrift store and reupholstered themselves. He walked through the house toward the deck, toward the ocean, toward his wife, toward the ghost he'd been mourning. His heart was hammering so hard he thought he might pass out. His hands were sweating. His vision tunneled until all he could see was that wheelchair, that person, that impossible reality. Rachel must have heard the footsteps because the wheelchair turned, slowly, mechanically. And there she was, thinner than he remembered, so thin he could see the bones of her wrists. Pale, her skin almost translucent in the sunlight, her beautiful dark hair now short and touched with gray, falling in wisps around a face he dreamed about every night for 5 years. But her eyes, those eyes were the same, wide and brown and now filling with tears that spilled over and ran down her cheeks. David? Rachel's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and broken. No, no, Jennifer, what did you do? You promised you wouldn't. You're dying, Rachel. Jennifer called from behind David, her voice echoing across the expensive tile floors. And I won't let you die alone. I won't let you die thinking he forgot you. Rachel's face crumpled. She tried to back the wheelchair away, as if she could escape, as if David hadn't just walked through fire to get here. You shouldn't be here. You need to leave. You moved on. You have a life. I can't. I won't destroy it again. I won't do that to you. David stood there, 10 feet from the woman he'd loved, grieved, buried, mourned. The woman who'd made the impossible choice. The woman who was dying. The woman who'd decided for him what he could handle, what he deserved to know, what his life should look like. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and he didn't know if he wanted to hold her or scream at her or both. Moved on? David's voice came out sharp, cutting through the sound of waves and seagulls. You think I moved on? I worked 2 jobs to afford a studio apartment in a neighborhood where I hear gunshots at night. I haven't dated anyone. I haven't even looked at anyone. I visit your grave every Sunday and tell your headstone about my week like you can hear me. I wear my wedding ring even though people think I'm crazy. That's not moving on, Rachel. That's surviving. Tears spilled down Rachel's cheeks, falling onto her thin hands folded in her lap. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, David. But you were supposed to. You were supposed to find happiness. That's why I stayed away. That's why I let you think I was dead. I thought if you could grieve, if you could let me go, you could find someone else. Someone who wouldn't ruin your life. Someone who wouldn't bring danger to your door. Well, I didn't. David took a step closer, his voice rising. I just learned to breathe around missing you. I learned to wake up every morning and remember you're gone, and somehow keep living anyway. And now you're telling me you've been here the whole time, that you're dying, that I get to lose you twice? Rachel's face twisted with pain that had nothing to do with her illness. I wanted to call you every single day, David. I'd pick up the phone and dial your number and just listen to it ring, because I knew if I heard your voice I'd break. I'd tell you everything and put you in danger, and I couldn't. I couldn't be the reason you died. That wasn't your choice to make. The words exploded out of David, years of grief and anger and confusion finding their target. The words echoed across the deck, across the sand, across the water. Rachel flinched like he'd struck her, and David saw how fragile she was now, how the illness had carved away at her, leaving someone who looked like his wife but smaller, more breakable. The anger drained out of him, replaced by something more complicated. Grief and love and fury and relief all tangled together into something he couldn't name. How long? David asked quietly, his voice hoarse. The doctors say 3 months, maybe less. 3 months, 90 days. After 5 years of nothing, after 5 years of grieving, after 5 years of learning to live without her, David would get 90 days. The unfairness of it, the cruelty, made him want to scream at the sky, at God, at the universe that had taken everything from him, twice. He crossed the remaining distance and knelt in front of the wheelchair, his knees hitting the expensive tile. Rachel's hands were trembling in her lap, and David reached out, covering them with his own. The touch sent electricity through him, familiar and foreign all at once. Her skin was cooler than he remembered, thinner, but it was her. It was Rachel, his wife, alive, dying, here. I hate you, David whispered, the words soft but honest. I hate you so much for what you did, for leaving me, for making me think you were dead, for deciding what I could handle instead of letting me choose, for taking away 5 years we could have had together. I know, Rachel sobbed, her whole body shaking. I know, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But I never stopped loving you. David's voice broke, tears finally spilling over, running down his face and dripping off his jaw. Not for one single day, not for one single moment. And if we only have 3 months, then I'm not wasting another second being apart. Rachel's eyes widened, hope and fear warring in her expression. David, no. You can't. I'm dying. You can't put yourself through this again. You can't watch me die. I won't do that to you. Watch me. David stood, his decision made, his path clear. I lost you once without a choice. I'm not losing you again without fighting for every second we have left. I'm not leaving. I'm staying. And you don't get to decide that for me anymore. Behind them, Jennifer quietly retreated into the house, leaving them alone with the ocean and the setting sun and the impossible, devastating gift of borrowed time. Rachel reached up with shaking hands and touched David's face, her fingers tracing the lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago, the gray in his hair, the changes that grief had carved into him. I don't deserve this, Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. I don't deserve you. I never did. No, David agreed, his hands covering hers, holding them against his face. You don't. But I'm here anyway, and we have 90 days to figure out what comes next. 90 days to say everything we should have said. 90 days to be together. What neither of them knew, what David would only discover when he started going through Rachel's medical records and asking questions the doctors couldn't quite answer, was that Rachel's illness wasn't quite what it seemed, that 3 months might not be the truth, that someone wanted to make sure Rachel's testimony stayed buried forever, and that David asking questions was about to put both of their lives in danger all over again. The people Rachel had testified against, they had friends, they had money, and they had very long memories. David moved into the beach house the next day with nothing but a duffel bag of clothes, his laptop, and a heart full of questions he didn't know how to ask. Rachel had protested weakly, had tried to push him away with arguments about his job and his apartment and his life, but David had been firm. He'd called his manager at the warehouse and quit over text. He'd called his evening job at the grocery store and done the same. He'd emailed his landlord and broken his lease, willing to lose the deposit, willing to lose everything if it meant spending Rachel's last 3 months with her. Nothing else mattered. Not money, not security, not the life he'd built from the ruins of losing her. She was alive and dying, and he was staying. The first week was strange, surreal, like living in a dream he couldn't quite wake up from. They moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, familiar but awkward, intimate but distant. Rachel tired easily, spent most afternoons sleeping in her hospital bed. Yes, there was a hospital bed in the master bedroom now, along with oxygen tanks and IV poles and all the medical equipment that came with dying. David sat on the deck and stared at the ocean, trying to process the impossible reality he was living in, trying to reconcile the wife he'd buried with the woman sleeping upstairs, trying to understand how to be angry and grateful and heartbroken all at the same time. Jennifer came by every few days, bringing groceries, checking on her sister, watching David with worried eyes like she was waiting for him to break or leave or realize he'd made a mistake. But David didn't break. He cooked meals Rachel could barely eat. He read to her in the afternoons, the romance novels she'd always loved, the ones with happy endings she'd once believed in. He helped her to the bathroom when she was too weak to manage the wheelchair herself. He held her hand while she slept and pretended not to notice how fragile she'd become. She's been alone for 5 years, Jennifer said one afternoon while Rachel napped upstairs. They sat in the massive kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, drinking coffee from mugs that probably cost more than David's weekly grocery budget used to. The guilt has been eating her alive, every day, every hour, wondering if she made the right choice. Good, David said, and meant it. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the love and fear and grief. Then, softer, I don't know how to do this, Jennifer. How to be angry and in love at the same time. How to care for someone who broke my heart. You don't have to figure it out all at once. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Just be here. That's all she needs. That's all any of us need. But David was starting to notice things that didn't add up, little inconsistencies that nagged at the back of his mind. Rachel's medical records from her oncologist showed stage 4 pancreatic cancer with a 3-month prognosis. But Rachel didn't look like someone in the final stages. Yes, she was thin and tired, but her color was good. She ate well when she had an appetite. She had energy in the mornings, could carry conversations, could laugh at the jokes David made even when they weren't funny. David had watched his father die of cancer when he was 19. He knew what the end looked like. The yellowed skin, the pain that medication couldn't touch, the confusion and delirium. This wasn't it. 2 weeks in, David started asking questions. First to Rachel, who deflected and changed the subject, suddenly interested in talking about old memories or asking David about his life over the past 5 years. Then to the doctors, who suddenly became unavailable for phone calls, their secretaries saying they'd call back but never doing it. Then to Jennifer, who went pale when David brought it up over coffee, her hands shaking so badly she had to set down her mug. Just let it go, David. Please. Just enjoy the time you have with her. Don't make this harder than it already is. But David had never been good at letting things go. It was one of the things Rachel used to love about him, back when they were together, back when they were happy. David's stubborn determination to find the truth, to fix things, to understand how the world worked. He was an engineer. He needed things to make sense, to follow logical patterns, to have explanations that held up under scrutiny. He started digging. Late at night when Rachel was sleeping and the house was quiet, except for the sound of waves crashing against the shore, David went through everything. He found medical bills that didn't match the diagnosis, prescriptions for medications that weren't cancer drugs, weren't even related to cancer treatment. Steroids, yes. Pain medication, yes. But also anti-anxiety medications in doses that seemed extreme. Sleeping pills, medications he didn't recognize that he had to look up online, finding they were used for completely different conditions. He found email exchanges between Rachel and someone named Marcus Chen, the same last name as the woman who died in Rachel's place, the woman whose body David had identified, whose funeral he'd attended. The emails were vague but troubling, talking about the situation and maintaining appearances and protecting the asset. Asset. Like Rachel was a thing to be protected, not a person, not his wife. And then he found the file, hidden in Rachel's office. Yes, she had an entire office in this massive house, with a desk and filing cabinets and a computer she apparently still used, despite being supposedly too weak to leave her wheelchair most days. The drawer was locked, but David was an engineer. He picked it with a paperclip and a lot of patience, his heart hammering because he knew he was crossing a line, violating Rachel's privacy. But he couldn't stop himself. He needed to know. The file was labeled insurance, but inside was something entirely different. Photos of men in suits, professional headshots that looked like they came from corporate websites. Legal documents with whole sections redacted in black marker. A flash drive with "Backup, do not lose" written on it in Rachel's handwriting. And a letter from someone at the FBI thanking Rachel for her continued cooperation in an ongoing investigation. Continued. Present tense. Ongoing. Not past. Not finished 5 years ago like Jennifer had said. David's hands started shaking as he read further. He plugged the flash drive into Rachel's computer, his engineering mind already racing through possibilities, through explanations, through scenarios that might make sense of what he was finding. Financial records filled the screen. Offshore accounts with numbers so large David had to count the zeros twice. Names of executives who were supposedly in prison, but some of these transactions were dated within the last 6 months. The company Rachel had helped take down? It hadn't stayed down. Someone had rebuilt it under a new name, new faces, same crimes. And Rachel was still gathering evidence, still testifying, still working with the FBI, still in danger. "What are you doing?" Rachel's voice came from the doorway, sharp with panic and fear. David spun around in the desk chair. Rachel was standing, actually standing on her own 2 feet, holding onto the doorframe but bearing her own weight. Something she supposedly couldn't do with stage 4 cancer eating away at her body. Her face was pale but not with illness, with fear, with the realization that David had found her secrets. "You're not dying," David said quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Rachel's face went white, bloodless. "David, you're not dying." David stood, holding the flash drive like evidence in a trial. "This is fake. The cancer, the 3 months, the wheelchair, all of it. It's another lie. If you're enjoying this story so far, pause and comment, "I am enjoying this story," below. It's not a lie. Rachel's voice was desperate, pleading. The cancer was real. The diagnosis was real. But I went into remission 8 months ago. The doctor said it was a miracle, that the treatment worked better than anyone expected. I didn't. I couldn't tell anyone because... Because what? David felt the anger rising, hot and bright and consuming. Because you needed an excuse to stay hidden? Because you needed me to feel sorry for you so I wouldn't ask questions about why you've really been hiding for 5 years? No! Rachel took a shaky step forward, wobbling on legs that were weak from disuse but clearly functional. Because they told me if I stopped cooperating, if I came out of hiding, they'd come after you. The company, the people I helped put away, they have connections, friends in powerful places, people who want revenge. The FBI said my best protection was to stay dead, to keep gathering evidence, to help them build a case so strong that these people could never touch us again. David stared at her, his mind reeling. So you've been lying to everyone, to Jennifer, to me? You let me think you had 3 months to live so I'd stay, so I'd forgive you. I thought, Rachel's voice broke, tears streaming down her face. I thought if you believed I was dying, you'd stay. You'd give me time to figure out how to fix this, how to make everything right. The FBI is close, David, so close. Maybe 6 more months and we can end this. We can have a real life again. We can be together for real. 6 months? David's laugh was harsh, bitter. Last week it was 3 months. What's it going to be next week? A year? 2 years? Will you keep dying forever just to avoid telling me the truth? Just to avoid facing what you did? I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? David threw the flash drive onto the desk, watching it skitter across the polished wood. You keep making decisions about my life without asking me. You decided I couldn't handle the danger 5 years ago, so you faked your death. You decided I couldn't handle the truth now, so you faked cancer. When do I get to decide what I can handle, Rachel? When do I get to be an equal partner in my own life? Rachel wiped her eyes with shaking hands. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I know I keep messing up. But David, these people, they're dangerous. The man who rebuilt the company? His name is Victor Hale. He's Maria Chen's brother, and he blames me for her death. He's been looking for me for 5 years. If he finds out I'm alive, if he finds out you're here with me, then we go to the police, the FBI, someone who can actually help us. We are working with the FBI, but it takes time, evidence, airtight cases that will hold up in court. Rachel moved closer, reaching for David's hands, but he pulled away. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please, please trust me just a little longer. Let me finish this so we can be free, so we can actually have the life we always dreamed about. David pulled his hands away from her reach, stepping back, putting distance between them. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Rachel. Every time I think I know the truth, there's another layer, another lie, another secret. How do I know this isn't another manipulation? How do I know any of this is real? The hurt on Rachel's face was genuine. David could see that much, could read the pain in her eyes. But he'd thought everything was genuine before too. Rachel was good at this, good at making him believe, good at making him feel like he was the crazy one for asking questions, for wanting truth, for demanding honesty. I'll prove it to you, Rachel said, her voice firm despite the tears. Tomorrow, I have a meeting with my FBI contact. You can come. You can hear everything. You can ask any questions you want. No more secrets, I swear. David wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her so badly it physically hurt. But something in his gut said this wasn't over, that there were more secrets buried in this house, more lies waiting to surface, more truths that would shatter what little trust remained between them. Fine, David said, tomorrow. But if you lie to me one more time, Rachel, if you keep one more secret, hide one more truth, I'm gone. For real this time. And you won't get to make that choice for me. I'll make it myself. Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. No more lies. I promise. I swear on our marriage, on everything we ever had together. Tomorrow, you'll see the truth. They didn't sleep in the same bed that night. David took a guest room, lying awake and staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more times his heart could break over the same person. Wondering if love was supposed to hurt this much. Wondering if he was a fool for staying, for giving her another chance, for believing that tomorrow would actually bring truth instead of more carefully constructed lies. At 3 in the morning, he heard Rachel moving around downstairs. David got up quietly and peered over the railing, staying in the shadows where she couldn't see him. Rachel was on the phone, pacing in the living room with the light from her cell phone illuminating her face. She was walking normally, no wheelchair, no weakness, moving like someone healthy and whole. I know it's risky, Rachel was saying, her voice low and urgent. But he found the files. He knows about Victor. I don't have a choice anymore. I have to bring him in or I'll lose him forever. A pause while the person on the other end spoke. No, he won't go to the police. He loves me. He'll understand once he knows everything. Another pause, longer this time. David held his breath, straining to hear. Fine, tomorrow at noon. And Marcus, make sure he doesn't find out David's here. If Victor knows David's with me, if he knows I'm not alone anymore, he'll move up his timeline. He'll come after us before we're ready. David's blood went cold. Timeline. Victor was planning something, and Rachel had known, had brought David here knowing there was active danger, active threat, knowing that just by being here, he was putting himself in the crosshairs of someone who wanted Rachel dead. He went back to the guest room and sat on the bed thinking, planning, making decisions Rachel wouldn't like. By the time the sun came up, painting the ocean gold and pink, David had made up his mind. He was going to that FBI meeting. He was going to hear the truth, the real truth this time, and then he was going to do what Rachel should have done 5 years ago. He was going to end this on his own terms, with his own choices, taking control of his own life. When Rachel knocked on the door at 9, David was already dressed and ready. Can we talk? Rachel asked softly. Before we go? After, David said. After I hear everything. After I know the whole truth. Then we can talk. They drove into the city in silence, the tension between them thick enough to choke on. Rachel kept glancing over, as if checking that David was still there, still real, still willing to give her this one last chance. David stared out the window and tried to prepare himself for whatever came next, for whatever new truths would reshape his understanding of the last 5 years. The FBI field office was downtown, all concrete and American flags and security that made David nervous. Rachel led him through checkpoints and metal detectors and finally into a conference room where a man in his 40s was waiting. He had kind eyes and tired shoulders, and the look of someone who'd seen too much and slept too little. David, he said, standing to shake hands. I'm Agent Marcus Chen. It's good to finally meet you. Rachel's told me a lot about you over the years. Maria's brother, David said, studying the man's face for signs of the sister who died in his wife's place. Marcus's expression flickered with surprise, then settled into sadness. Yes, my sister made her own choice to help Rachel, to sacrifice herself so Rachel could live and testify. I've spent 5 years making sure it wasn't for nothing, making sure the people who threatened her, who drove her to this, paid for what they did. He opened a laptop and began walking David through everything. The company where Rachel had worked, the fraud she'd discovered, not just embezzlement, but money laundering for international crime syndicates, funding for illegal operations, corruption that reached into government agencies. The threats that had started when she'd asked too many questions, the staged death and how they'd pulled it off. The ongoing investigation into Victor Hale's organization, which had rebuilt itself after the first round of arrests. The danger they were all in if Victor discovered Rachel was alive. It was overwhelming and detailed and terrifying. But it was also the truth. David could feel it. This was real. This was finally, actually real. And then Marcus said something that made David's world tilt on its axis again. We're ready to move. We have enough evidence to bring down Victor's entire operation, to put him away for life. But we need bait. Someone he wants badly enough that he'll expose himself to get to them. Someone he'll break cover for. Marcus looked directly at David, his expression grave. We need you to let him know Rachel's alive, and we need you to be the one to do it. David stared at him. You want me to paint a target on my back? You want me to be the reason he comes out of hiding? We want to end this, Marcus said quietly, his voice steady and certain. So you and Rachel can have the life you deserve. So my sister's sacrifice means something. But yes, there's risk involved. Significant risk. Which is why this is entirely your choice. Rachel didn't want me to ask you. She wanted to keep you out of it, to protect you like she's been protecting you for 5 years. But I think you deserve to decide for yourself whether you want to help end this or walk away. David looked at Rachel, who was crying silently, shaking her head, mouthing, "Please don't," across the table. And there it was. The same pattern repeating itself. Rachel trying to protect him by cutting him out. Rachel making decisions without him. Rachel treating him like he was fragile, incapable, something to be sheltered instead of partnered with. Tell me the plan, David said to Marcus. David, no. Rachel's voice broke. Tell me the plan, David repeated, louder, firmer, his voice filled with 5 years of anger and grief and determination. So Marcus told him. It was dangerous. David would have to approach Victor directly, would have to convince him that he was angry at Rachel, that he wanted revenge for being lied to, that he'd be willing to help Victor find her in exchange for money, or closure, or whatever motivation made sense. David would wear a wire. He'd meet Victor in a public place. He'd let Victor think he was weak, broken, manipulable. And when Victor made his move, when he revealed his plans, when he incriminated himself, the FBI would close in. It meant David could get hurt. It meant putting himself directly in danger. It meant trusting that the FBI would get to him in time if things went wrong. But it also meant ending this, really ending it, so Rachel could stop running, so David could stop grieving, so they could figure out if there was anything left worth saving between them after 5 years of lies and loss. I'll do it, David said. Rachel grabbed his hand across the table, her grip desperate. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to be brave or heroic or just stay safe. Please, David, just stay safe. I can't lose you. Not for real. Not forever. David looked at the woman he loved, the woman who'd lied and protected and sacrificed and controlled everything in their lives for 5 years. I'm not doing this for you, Rachel. I'm doing it for me. Because I'm tired of being the person things happen to. I'm tired of being protected and sheltered and lied to for my own good. I want to be the person who makes things happen. I want to be the person who ends this nightmare we've been living. Marcus started explaining the details, the timeline, the backup plans, the ways they'd keep David safe. But David was only half listening, watching Rachel fall apart across the table, watching her realize that David wasn't going to be protected anymore, that David was choosing danger, choosing agency, choosing to take control of his own story for the first time in 5 years. What David didn't know, what Marcus didn't tell him because Marcus didn't know himself yet, was that Victor Hale had people inside the FBI, that someone on the inside was feeding him information, that the plan was already compromised before David even walked out of that conference room. By the time David walked into the meeting that was supposed to trap Victor Hale, he wouldn't be walking into a controlled situation with backup surrounding him. He'd be walking into an ambush where the only person who could save him would be the woman who'd spent 5 years learning to survive in the shadows, learning to be ruthless, learning to do whatever it took to protect the man she loved, even if it meant becoming the very thing she'd been hiding from. The wire itched against David's skin, taped beneath his shirt like a mechanical heartbeat he couldn't silence. He sat in the restaurant Marcus had chosen, neutral ground, lunch rush crowd, security cameras positioned at every angle, and waited for Victor Hale to arrive. Across the room, Marcus was at a corner table pretending to read the Wall Street Journal. Backup agents were scattered throughout the space, invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for, disguised as businessmen having lunch meetings and couples arguing quietly over salads. Rachel was back at the safe house, locked down with 2 agents who'd been instructed not to let her leave under any circumstances. She'd begged David not to do this, had cried and pleaded and tried every argument she could think of, had told him she loved him, that she couldn't survive losing him, that if something happened to him it would destroy her. But David had been firm, unmovable. This ended today. No more running, no more hiding, no more letting Rachel make decisions about his life without his input. Victor arrived exactly on time, 12 o'clock, not a minute early or late. He was handsome in a dangerous way that David recognized from the photos in Rachel's files. Sharp tailored suit that probably cost more than David used to make in a month. Expensive watch catching the light. Smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He slid into the booth across from David and ordered a scotch like they were old friends meeting to discuss business. "David," he said warmly, his voice smooth and cultured. "Thank you for reaching out. I was surprised to get your message. Pleasantly surprised, I should say." "I want this to end," David said, exactly like Marcus had coached him during their 3 days of preparation. "Rachel's sick. Really sick this time. Stage 4 cancer. 3 months to live. And before she goes, I need answers about what really happened 5 years ago. About your sister, Maria. About the truth Rachel won't tell me." Victor's expressions shifted subtly, something dark flickering beneath the charm. Grief, maybe, or rage masked as grief. "My sister died because of your wife's recklessness, because Rachel valued her own survival over Maria's life. But I'm curious why you'd come to me for answers instead of asking Rachel directly. Why trust the enemy?" "Because Rachel lies," David said, and that part wasn't coached. That part was completely, painfully true. "She's been lying to me for 5 years about everything. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if anything she ever told me was real." "No," Victor agreed, studying David's face like he was reading a book. "You don't. Would you like to know what's real? Would you like to see what your wife has been hiding from you?" He pulled out a phone and slid it across the table with careful, deliberate movements. On the screen was a video, paused on the first frame. David's hands trembled as he pressed play, his heart hammering because he knew whatever he was about to see would change everything again. It was security footage from 5 years ago. A parking garage, concrete pillars casting shadows, the timestamp reading 11:47 p.m. Rachel and a woman who must have been Maria Chen stood beside a car, arguing. David couldn't hear the audio, but he could see their body language. Rachel's face twisted with anger, Maria stepping back with her hands raised in a placating gesture. Then Rachel lunged forward and shoved Maria hard, both hands against her shoulders. Maria stumbled backward, her heels catching on the concrete, arms windmilling as she tried to catch her balance. She fell hard, her head cracking against the ground with an impact David could almost hear. She lay there, not moving, clearly hurt. And Rachel stood there for 3 seconds. David counted them. 1, 2, 3, looking down at Maria on the ground. Then she ran, just turned and ran away, leaving Maria bleeding on the concrete floor of that parking garage. "The fall didn't kill her immediately," Victor said softly, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "But the head injury meant she couldn't think clearly, couldn't move right. When the car caught fire 20 minutes later, a fire Rachel had arranged as part of staging her death, Maria couldn't escape. She was trapped, conscious, aware. The autopsy showed she died from smoke inhalation, not the fire itself. She suffocated slowly, unable to get out, while your wife was already miles away thinking she was safe." David's stomach turned, bile rising in his throat. "You're lying." Rachel said Maria volunteered to help her, said she knew the risks, said they were in it together. "Maria did volunteer," Victor agreed, his eyes never leaving David's face. "My sister was a good person who wanted to help someone in danger. But she didn't volunteer to be assaulted and abandoned. She didn't volunteer to die alone and terrified. And Rachel never told you that part, did she? That she killed my sister through violence and cowardice. That she's not a victim or a hero. She's a murderer who's been hiding behind a lie for 5 years. The wire felt like it was burning against David's skin. This wasn't going according to plan. Victor was supposed to threaten him, supposed to reveal his criminal activities, supposed to give them the evidence they needed to arrest him. Instead, he was showing David truths about Rachel that Marcus had never mentioned, truths that changed the entire story David thought he knew. If you're enjoying this story so far, pause and comment, "I am enjoying this story" below. "What do you want from me?" David asked, his voice shaking despite his effort to stay calm. "I want justice. Real justice. Not the kind bought with FBI deals and witness protection." Victor leaned forward, his voice intense. "Rachel destroyed my family. She killed my sister and then hid behind the law, playing victim while Maria's children grew up without their mother. I want Rachel to face real consequences, and I want you to help me find her. Tell me where she is, and I promise you'll be safe. You can walk away from all of this. You can have the life you deserve, free from her lies." David's mind raced, trying to reconcile what he was hearing with what he thought he knew. Marcus had warned him Victor would try to manipulate him, would try to turn him against Rachel with partial truths and emotional appeals. But this video, was it real? Had Rachel really pushed Maria? Had she really left her to die? "I need time to think," David said, his throat tight. Victor smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who knew he had his predator cornered. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But David, time is something Rachel doesn't have much of anymore. If you want answers before she dies, before she takes all her secrets to the grave, you should decide quickly." He stood, straightened his tie with practiced ease, and walked out of the restaurant. Just like that. No threats, no violence, no demands for immediate answers. Just truth and questions, and the slow poison of doubt spreading through David's mind like venom. Marcus appeared at his table 30 seconds later, his face tight with concern and confusion. "Are you okay? What did he say? We couldn't hear everything clearly. There was interference with the wire. Some kind of signal jammer he must have been using." David stared at him, his mind reeling. "The wire didn't work? You didn't hear any of it?" "We got fragments, pieces, but David, what happened? What did he show you?" David handed over Victor's phone, which had been left behind deliberately. Marcus watched the video, his face going progressively paler, his jaw tightening with each second. "We need to get you back to the safe house, right now." They rushed through the city in an unmarked car, Marcus making urgent calls and coordinating with his team. David sat in the back seat, numb and sick, the video playing on repeat in his mind. Rachel running away, Maria on the ground. 3 seconds that changed everything he thought he knew about his wife. When they arrived at the safe house, Rachel was pacing the living room like a caged animal, frantic with worry. She ran to David the moment he walked through the door, her hands reaching for him, checking him for injuries. "Thank God! Are you okay? Did he hurt you? Did he threaten you? What did he—" "Did you push Maria?" David asked, his voice flat and emotionless. Rachel froze, her hands still on David's shoulders. "What?" "Victor showed me security footage. You and Maria arguing in a parking garage. You pushed her. She fell and hit her head, and you ran away and left her there." The color drained from Rachel's face like someone had pulled a plug. Her hands dropped to her sides. "He showed you that. Is it true?" Rachel's silence was answer enough, and David felt something inside his chest crack, some foundation of belief finally crumbling. Emma had been right to doubt, right to question, right to demand truth. "It was an accident," Rachel finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "We were arguing about the plan, about whether to go through with it. She wanted to back out at the last minute, said it was too dangerous, too risky. I was trying to convince her, and I pushed her shoulder, not hard. I swear I didn't mean to hurt her. But she was wearing heels and she lost her balance and fell. I panicked. I knew if anyone found us together, if there were questions, if the police got involved, the whole plan would fall apart. The people who were threatening me would know I was trying to disappear. So I ran." "She died because you ran." David's voice was hollow, empty. "I know." Rachel's voice broke into a sob. "Do you think I don't know that? I've lived with that guilt every single day for 5 years. I killed her. Not on purpose, but I killed her anyway. And then I hid behind her sacrifice like I was the victim, like I was the hero. I let everyone believe she died to save me when the truth is I killed her and ran away like a coward. David backed away from her, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You let me think you were a hero. You let me think Maria was a noble sacrifice. You let everyone believe. Because I'm a coward, Rachel screamed, tears streaming down her face. Because I couldn't face what I'd done. Because if I admitted the truth, I'd lose everything. The FBI protection, my freedom, you. So I lied. I built my entire new life on a lie, and I've been lying about everything ever since because I'm too weak to face the truth. Marcus stepped between them, his voice firm, but not unkind. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to focus. Victor left his phone behind deliberately. He's sending a message. He wants us to know he has more evidence, that he can destroy you, Rachel, whenever he wants. He's playing a longer game than we anticipated. Let him, Rachel said bitterly, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I deserve whatever he does to me. I deserve prison. I deserve to lose everything. God knows I've earned it. No. David's voice was quiet but firm, surprising even himself. No, he doesn't get to win. Not after everything. Both Rachel and Marcus looked at him in surprise, confusion on their faces. Victor's right that you're a coward, David said to Rachel, his words deliberate and cutting. And he's right that you've been hiding behind lies for 5 years. But he's also a criminal who's hurt God knows how many other people, who's built an empire on illegal money and corruption. And I'm not letting him walk away just because you made terrible, unforgivable choices. What are you saying? Marcus asked, his mind already working through possibilities. David's engineering brain was working fast, putting pieces together, seeing patterns in the chaos. Victor gave me his phone. That means everything on it is admissible as evidence, right? All his communications, his contacts, his financial records, his criminal activities. Marcus's eyes widened with understanding. Yes, if it was freely given to you without coercion, then use it. Build your case. Arrest him and everyone in his organization. David turned to Rachel, his heart breaking even as he did what needed to be done. And you're going to turn yourself in. You're going to tell the truth about what happened to Maria. All of it. No more lies. No more hiding. No more witness protection deals that let you escape consequences. Rachel's face crumpled, her whole body shaking. I'll go to prison. For manslaughter at minimum. Maybe longer. Maybe, David said, his voice steady despite the tears on his own face. Probably, but at least you'll finally be free. Free from the lies. Free from the guilt. Free from the person you've been pretending to be. And us? Rachel's voice was barely a whisper, broken and desperate. What happens to us? To our marriage? To everything we had? David looked at the woman he loved. The woman who'd lied and run and broken his heart in 1,000 different ways over 5 years. He felt the love still there, stubborn and painful, and refusing to die even when it absolutely should. But he also felt something else. Clarity. Strength. The knowledge that love alone wasn't enough to build a life on. I don't know, David said honestly, his voice thick with emotion. I love you. I think I'll always love you, Rachel. You're woven into every part of who I am. But I can't be with someone I don't trust. And I don't trust you anymore. You've proven over and over that you'll choose the easy lie over the hard truth every single time. I can change, Rachel pleaded, reaching for him. I will change. I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me another chance. Please, David, please. You've had 5 years of chances. You used every single one to lie to me, to manipulate me, to decide what I could handle without asking me. David's eyes filled with tears that finally spilled over. I'm done being the person you lie to. I'm done being the person you protect by cutting out of your own life. If you want a chance with me, a real chance, not built on lies and manipulation, you need to prove you can tell the truth, even when it costs you everything. Marcus cleared his throat, giving them a moment of privacy. I'll give you two some space. But Rachel, David's right. It's time to come clean. It's time to face what you did. He left the room, his footsteps echoing on the expensive tile. Rachel and David stood in the silence. 5 years of love and pain and betrayal hanging between them like fog. "I'm scared," Rachel whispered, looking small and broken and finally honest. "I know," David said, his voice gentler now. "But I'll be there. Not as your husband. Not yet. Maybe not ever again. But I'll be there when you tell the truth. I'll be there when you face the consequences. And after, we'll see what's left. We'll see if there's anything worth rebuilding." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face, her whole body trembling. "I don't deserve you. I never did." "No," David agreed, allowing himself to step forward and gently wipe the tears from her cheeks. "You don't. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is what we do next, who we choose to be from this moment forward." 3 months later, David sat in a courtroom gallery and watched Rachel testify. Watched her tell the complete truth about Maria for the first time. The argument, the push, the fall, the decision to run. Watched her take full responsibility for 5 years of lies and manipulation. Watched her cry as she described the guilt that had eaten at her every single day. Victor Hale sat at the defense table, his empire crumbling around him as the evidence from his phone buried him. Financial crimes, money laundering, connections to organized crime. 25 years, the judge said. Victor would be an old man before he saw freedom again. The judge sentenced Rachel to 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service. A light sentence considering everything, but the prosecutor had argued that Rachel's cooperation and testimony over the past 5 years had put away multiple criminal organizations, that her work with the FBI had saved lives, that justice could be served without destroying someone who'd already been a victim before she became a perpetrator. David watched Rachel walk out of the courtroom, a free woman, legally speaking. But he could see in her eyes that she finally understood the weight of what she'd done, the cost of her choices, the price of her lies. After the trial, they met at a small coffee shop downtown, neutral ground, public place, the kind of place where they used to meet when they were dating, before marriage, before everything got complicated. "Thank you for being there," Rachel said quietly, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "Through all of it, you didn't have to be. I said I would be. Where do we go from here?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and pain. David considered carefully. He'd spent the last 3 months building a new life, while Rachel faced her consequences. A better job using his engineering degree. A therapist who was helping him process 5 years of grief and betrayal. Friends who didn't know about the chaos of his past, who just knew him as David, not as the man whose wife faked her death. He'd learned to stand on his own, to trust himself, to know that he could survive anything, even losing Rachel all over again. "I don't know," David said honestly. "I'm not ready to try again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The foundation of trust is completely shattered, Rachel. It would take years to rebuild, and even then I don't know if it's possible." "Can I call you?" Rachel asked, her voice small and hopeful. "Sometimes? Not to pressure you or manipulate you or try to convince you, just to talk, to let you see that I'm trying to be different." "Sometimes," David agreed carefully. "But Rachel, no more lies, not even small ones, not even to protect me or spare my feelings. If we're ever going to have anything real again, it has to be built on complete, painful, uncomfortable truth." "I understand." Rachel reached across the table, not quite touching David's hand, but close enough that he could feel the warmth. "I'm getting real help. Therapy twice a week. I'm learning to sit with the hard things instead of running from them. Learning to tell the truth even when it makes me look bad." "Good," David said sincerely. "That's good. I'm proud of you for doing that work." They talked for an hour about small, safe things, the weather turning cold, books they were reading, the community service Rachel was doing at a women's shelter, helping other people who were running from dangerous situations. It was strange and sad and carried the tiniest seed of hope. When they said goodbye, Rachel hugged him. David let himself sink into it for just a moment, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the familiar shape of her body against his. Then he stepped back, creating necessary distance. "See you around," David said. "See you around," Rachel echoed, managing a small smile through her tears. David walked away without looking back. He didn't know if they'd find their way to each other again. Didn't know if love was enough to overcome everything they'd been through. The lies, the death, the grief, the betrayal. But for the first time in 5 years, he knew something more important. He knew who he was without Rachel. He knew he could survive anything. He knew he deserved truth and respect, and a love that didn't require him to be ignorant or protected or manipulated for his own good. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. 6 months later, David's phone rang on a Saturday morning, Rachel's name on the screen. He stared at it for 3 rings before answering, his heart rate picking up despite his best efforts to stay calm. "Hi," he said cautiously. "Hi," Rachel said back, and he could hear the nervousness in her voice. "I was wondering, there's this new Thai place that opened downtown, the one in the old bookstore building. I thought maybe, if you're free, we could try it. Just dinner. No pressure. No expectations." David smiled despite himself, despite everything. "Just dinner?" "Just dinner," Rachel promised, her voice steady. "And I'll tell you about my week, the truth about my week, including the hard parts, including the parts where I messed up or felt tempted to lie but didn't." David looked out the window of his apartment, the nice one, the one he could afford now with his better engineering job. The sun was shining. People were walking dogs on the street below. Life was continuing in all its messy, complicated glory. "Okay," David said, surprising himself. "When? Tonight? 7? I'll be there." David hung up and sat with the feeling for a moment. He didn't know what would happen tonight. Didn't know if he and Rachel could ever rebuild what they'd lost. If trust could be reconstructed from rubble and ruins. But he was willing to find out. Not because he needed Rachel. Not because he couldn't live without her. But because sometimes love deserved a second chance. As long as it was built on truth this time. Complete, uncomfortable, vulnerable truth. That evening, David stood outside the Thai restaurant at 6:58, nervous and hopeful and terrified in equal measure. Rachel arrived at exactly 7, wearing a simple dress and carrying flowers, sunflowers, his favorite, not the lilies he used to leave at her grave. "Too much?" Rachel asked, seeing his expression. "No," David admitted, accepting them with a small smile. "They're perfect, thank you." They went inside. They ordered food. They talked. Rachel told David about her week, the good parts and the difficult parts. The therapy session where she'd finally confronted her deepest shame. The job interview for a position helping other whistleblowers navigate the legal system. The moment she'd been tempted to lie to make herself sound better, but chose truth instead, even though it was embarrassing. David listened, really listened. And somewhere between the spring rolls and the pad thai, he felt something shift inside his chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever completely, but possibility. The tiniest seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could grow something new from the ashes of what they'd lost. "Thank you for giving me this chance," Rachel said as they walked to their cars afterward, the night air cool and clean. "Thank you for earning it," David replied honestly. They stood in the parking lot under the streetlights, the future uncertain and terrifying and full of potential. Rachel didn't try to kiss him. David didn't invite her home. But they made plans to meet again in 2 weeks. Small steps, building slowly. It wasn't the ending David had imagined when Rachel disappeared 5 years ago. It wasn't the fairy tale reunion or the perfect reconciliation where everything was magically fixed. But it was honest. It was real. It was theirs. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Emma drove home with his windows down, cool night air on his face, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something close to peace. Whatever came next, with Rachel, with work, with life, he would handle it, with or without her, strong and whole and finally free from the prison of lies they'd both been living in. The end was also a beginning, and David was ready for both.